All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Transfer Student Housing Information session. My name is Allison Southern. I'm a Program and Operations Manager for Housing and Residence Life.
And I'm Kate Kerno. I am the Associate Director of Resident Services for Housing and Residence Life.
First of all, I want to congratulate everyone on your acceptance to Georgia Tech. We hope that you'll be joining us in the spring. We're going to be talking about go through the agenda. First, we want to say that this presentation will be recorded and shared on our Housing and Residence Life website in a few days after the information session, if you need to go back and review any of the information. So first, we're going to start talking about applying for on-campus housing, the housing application process, spring 2025, our academic year lottery, community options, and waitlist resources. And then Kate's going to take it over to talk more about considering your off-campus housing options, how to use our off-campus housing site, some considerations, the timeline for your search, and how to set yourself up for residency if that is the route you choose. So first, we want to start off by saying housing at Georgia Tech is not required and it's not guaranteed. We don't have a live-on requirement for any of our incoming students. In 2024, we held out approximately 400 spaces for our new transfer students. Just to give you a little context, we are trying to prioritize our transfer students on campus. And so what you will do is, now that you've been admitted to Georgia Tech, you'll pay your admission deposit and then you can apply for housing. We do have a one-time $80 non-refundable application fee. And that's regardless of whether you come to campus or not. But I will say, and we'll get into this in a little bit later, the admission deposit is not a requirement in order to apply for academic year 25-26 housing. You still have to pay your admission deposit to come to Georgia Tech, but it is not a requirement to apply for housing. So our spring 2025 housing application is now open. We will most likely hit a wait list probably in mid to late December, based on the number of cancellations and open bed spaces that we currently have. So we encourage you to go ahead and apply now if you're interested in living on campus in the spring. Once you've applied for housing, and you will note that you're applying for a housing space or you're applying for the wait list. So you'll know in that signing the housing contract, which one you're applying for. If you have a space on campus, you'll be able to participate in roommate selection. You can either select a roommate through our portal or don't. A lot of our students will go random and just pick their bed space based on the location. We do have a set of profile questions that you can use at My Housing to find that perfect roommate. But to note, our community and LLC students can only select roommates who are also in the same program. Once you have participated or not in roommate selection, you will be able to participate in room selection or self-assign in December, and that will be by a time ticket. Our incoming students will receive that time ticket based on the order of their spring 2025 housing application and when you submit that. Similar to roommate selection, our LLC students will only have the option of rooms within those program buildings. You must live in the same community with your other program participants. So for 25-26, Georgia Tech Housing is moving to a lottery system for our returning students. And the reason we wanted to have this specific information session is because as a spring 2025 transfer student, you will be considered a returning undergraduate for the next academic year. So that means our students who would like to live with us in fall will need to apply for the lottery by November 18th at 8 a.m., which is why we are removing that admission deposit requirement to apply for the academic year housing. So if you're not sure if you're going to come to Georgia Tech, but you are still considering, we know that your deadline to deposit to Georgia Tech is in December, but you'd like to be considered for academic year housing, please go ahead and apply for the lottery. If you apply after November 18th, you will be placed on the wait list in order of your application. Students will be notified of their lottery decision on November 22nd. So you will still find out whether you will have housing for the academic year or if you were on the wait list in November so that you can make plans accordingly. For academic year 25-26, similar to spring housing, you can select a roommate or not. It doesn't have to be the same from spring to the academic year contract. And our LLC students, again, can only select roommates from those programs. For room selection, you will be able to do that. This says July, I apologize, but it will actually be in early spring based on the number of credit hours you've accrued at Georgia Tech. So any of the credit hours that you've accrued will put you in your spot for room selection. Some of our community options that we have for our transfer students, we have the transfer year experience, which is currently housed in Harris. You have access to full-time hall directors, program staff, and upper class resident assistants. There is a spring retreat that you would be required to attend if you participated in that program. And this is an opportunity for our transfer students to have some additional support within the residence halls from those program staff to help make your transition to Georgia Tech just a little bit easier through networking and mentor opportunities. We also have the Explore Living Learning Community and the Honors Program Living Learning Community. Those are in an apartment style space on West Campus in the 8th Street apartments. Similar to the transfer year experience, they have dedicated hall directors, LLC staff and faculty, and upper class resident assistants. You're living with program participants from their first year all the way through their 4th year in this apartment style space. They have required courses associated with each program, spring retreats, different events and tutoring opportunities, and those invitations are sent on a rolling basis. And currently the honors program does have space available, so that application is available at your admission portal. Some of the options that you'll see if you live on campus with us as a transfer student are, again, you can live on East or West Campus. And typically our transfer students live in suites or apartment style housing. Our apartments are typically 4 or 6 person, and then the largest difference is whether you have a kitchen in your room, as you can see in the example floor plan of a 4-person apartment, or a kitchen on the floor, as you'll see with our suites. So our suites are a traditional bed space, 2 roommates in each side of the space with a bathroom in the middle, and then you'll have a shared common lounge and kitchen on every floor. And those spaces are gendered by apartment or suite, and the floors are co-ed. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and she is going to tell you everything you need to know about off-campus life.
Hey folks, like I said before, my name is Kate Curnow, and as part of my role, we work to put together resources to help students who are going to be living off campus feel more confident and feel like they have the resources and information they need to live off campus confidently. So there's quite a few things to think about, and it's worth all of y'all as incoming transfer students to know kind of what the landscape is like here around us at Georgia Tech. The good news is there is a ton of student housing around us of all different shapes and varieties. So Allison just talked through our on-campus housing options. Around Georgia Tech, there is a lot of what is considered student apartments, not to be confused with a conventional apartment. And in a student apartment, you're more likely to have it be fully furnished already. Usually all the utilities are included. It's meant to be a little bit more of a stepping stone from campus housing where you have that little bit more support to moving towards a more conventional apartment. Now there's plenty of conventional apartments around campus as well, and that's where you have a more typical lease where you'd be setting up your own utilities most likely, and you would be bringing in your own furniture in most cases as well. Similarly, there are some places around us that are true houses that if somebody was looking to live in an actual house, that is an option. There's a few of those around us for anybody who is looking to move in that direction. So we do want to start by showing y'all the off-campus housing site that we have, because this is going to be the #1 place for you to start in any searching that you're going to be doing or any questions that you have related to off-campus housing. This webpage, it's offcampus.housing.godtech.edu. This is something that we have a partner organization that we work with to put this together. And what they do is they aggregate all of the leases from nearby Georgia Tech, where the property management company has said, we want Georgia Tech students in our halls. We want to rent to Tech students. We understand what we're getting into. So we list ourselves on this site. And so anybody who's listed there, you know that they're going to be willing to work with a student, that they're going to be at least slightly connected to the university and have a little bit of more of a relationship with us. So that's all just really helpful to know, and to know that when you go onto this webpage, you can search and filter by all sorts of things, whether it's the length of your lease, how many roommates you're looking to have, how far from campus you want to be, all those kind of things. There's quite a bit to search through. It's worth noting that there's also two pages within this site that are going to be behind an SSO login, so meaning single sign-on. So you've logged in with your Georgia Tech credentials, and that's for either the roommates page or the subleasing page. So for both of those, if you're either looking to get another roommate or be a roommate that's joining, maybe a pre-existing roommate group, or if you're looking to sublease or be a letter, those are great places to do it because you know that you're going to be engaged only with other Georgia Tech students. So we heavily recommend that. It's also worth visiting the site just because there's a ton of renter education. So whether that's information about what to look for when you're signing your lease, ways to make sure that you get your deposit back in full, all those kind of things. And actually some of the resources we're going to talk through here briefly in the next little bit, but again, they remain available all the time on this website for you to revisit as needed. This is just a little bit more of a look at some of the things that you can sort by and the different ways that you can kind of parse out which apartment you want to move to next. One of the best things about living in off-campus housing is that roommates is even more of an open-ended thing. So if you would like to live with folks from other universities, you can. If you want to live by yourself, it's going to be a lot easier to do that if you're off campus. There are a lot of pre-existing roommate groups that you as a transfer student might be in a great position to plug a hole if they're, so it's worth looking at that roommates board to see if there's any pre-existing students or groups from Georgia Tech in the halls or in the apartments nearby that you can join. We heavily recommend a roommate agreement like we do if you were living with us in the halls. There's a ton of sample roommate agreements you can find online, and we just really recommend that anybody living off campus does that so that you talk about cleaning responsibilities, how you split up and pay utilities together and all that kind of stuff. We know for a lot of folks, cost is a big factor, and in looking at what housing is available off campus nearby, it's nice to know that when you look at that website, you can typically figure out whether or not utilities are included, and depending on which utilities are included, that'll also can affect your calculus for your monthly budget. If you're going to be splitting rent with other roommates, obviously that can make things much more cost effective. Here we have just a little bit of a breakdown of some of the housing nearby, and again, this is just sort of a snapshot based on what is listed nearby us right now. So you can see that if you're living alone, it is certainly going to be more expensive, but if you have roommates and live off campus, generally speaking, you can find things that are about the same cost per month as on-campus housing. You certainly can find more expensive, but if you look, you also can find the stuff that is comparably priced.
And I
That
just
said-
want to
yeah.
say, I'm sorry, I saw someone raise their hand. If you will please put any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A, we will answer all of those when we get finished with the presentation. So I just saw that raised hand and just wanted to say that we will have Q&A at the end. So just as an FYI.
So as far as thinking further about cost, we heavily recommend that all students track down a budget calculator. Again, you can Google that and find all sorts of different types of budget calculators. So find the one that works for you so that you can plan for and really be mindful of the costs that you have on a monthly basis that are going to be fixed costs, as well as more flexible or, varying costs that you would have month to month. Utilities, we think, is a big one. And so understanding that typically for a student in Atlanta, it's about $180 per month in utilities. And that's for a pretty typically sized apartment as well. So just being mindful of all those costs and knowing that that's something that you want to bundle all of that into your thinking and use a budget calculator as you do that. We know a lot of y'all will be paying for that off-campus housing with financial aid. So a couple of important notes about that, because it's definitely possible and most students will go that route. So if you're paying with financial aid, what'll basically happen is you wait for the leftover funds to be sent to you. And that typically happens in early September, sometimes a little later than that. And so you want to make sure that you are aware of the calendar of disbursement that the Office of Financial Aid puts on their website that tells you when you should expect that money. You also on that website can sign up for direct deposit so that the money that's left over hits your bank account right away. And we cannot recommend that enough. Waiting for a check can take months. And for some students that has been a real problem. So signing up for direct deposit, we just absolutely recommend. And so just knowing that you can find that information there because you want to have that money hit your account as soon as possible. And then you'll use that leftover money to pay your rent throughout the year. It is worth noting that a lot of the places near campus know about this disbursement delay and the fact that students paying with financial aid might need a little bit of grace those first month or two. And so a lot of the properties nearby will have a grace period that they give you in terms of not charging you a late fee early in the year, especially if you're paying with financial aid. That's an important thing for you to pay attention to in your lease, of course, but several of the folks nearby will have that stipulation in their lease. I want to talk just a little bit about the neighborhoods nearby. We know some of you might be transferring from a school in the area, but some of you are from farther away. So around Georgia Tech, there's sort of 4 key neighborhoods, one of them much smaller than the others. So kind of going counterclockwise from Midtown around. Midtown is the neighborhood directly east of campus. It's on the other side of the highway. It is decidedly the most kind of urban, high-rise, hip-hop hopping area. There's a lot more, like the restaurant scene is bigger there. There's certainly a lot more just human activity at any given time of day or night there. So it's definitely the most kind of urban neighborhood near campus, but it also means that it's just chock full of other students living there. And so it's a lot of Georgia Tech folks in that community. Home Park is directly north of us, and that's everything between campus and Atlantic Station, which is a great place where students will go and spend a lot of time. Home Park is typically smaller houses that have been broken up into smaller apartments within the house, and those are typically managed by private landlords who are just renting out those handful of spaces on a person-to-person basis, but they will be listed on that same website. So if you're looking for more of a it's like smaller home feel, Home Park is definitely the way to go. West Midtown is going to have a little more of the urban feel that Midtown has, but West Midtown is like the post-industrial, like warehouse district. So it definitely has a little bit more of that vibe to it. But again, lots of good restaurants. It is just a smidge further to get to some of those apartments from campus, whereas the Midtown, they are literally just next to the building where you would have campus or class potentially. So West Midtown is a great place, especially if you did want to have just a smidge more space and separation from campus. And then Centennial Park is directly south of campus, and particularly south of the North Avenue apartments and the stadium. And Centennial Place is actually a much smaller kind of area, much quieter. And despite the fact that it's right between us and downtown, I would say that it is the most suburban neighborhood of the ones that surround us. So Centennial Place is a smaller apartment complex, like not a high rise, and so it just has a little bit more of that small community feel. Generally speaking, anywhere you live, you're going to be between 10 and 20 minutes from getting into campus and into the heart of campus, depending on how fast you walk or what vehicle you take. The GT perimeter and safety jurisdiction branches out into all of these areas, and there's lots of other campus support that stretches beyond that, which I think the next slide gets into. Yeah, so talking about safety, we have this here because this is what GTPD recommends and puts in front of students, but we really want to make it clear that considering there's a lot of very urban off-campus housing right next to campus, we really don't have some of the issues you might expect in terms of safety. For the most part, the issues that we see in the off-campus housing is vehicle theft and vehicle break-ins. So beyond that is people in the middle of the night who are walking with their headphones in and their laptop open as they walk through the street. So there's a couple of tips here that you see about, letting folks know if you're going to be walking somewhere late at night and some of those other things that we recommend. And generally speaking, GTPD feels like those are the steps you need to take to remain safe. So again, we want to reiterate that around campus in these heavily urban areas, we really don't have the kind of crime issues you might expect, but we do want you to be smart when you're walking around or leaving valuables in your vehicle.
GTPD likes to say they're often crimes of opportunity.
Getting to and from campus, I know I mentioned that depending on which kind of area you choose will affect that a little bit, but it's also worth noting that a lot of the properties around us either offer transit or are so close to campus that it's not needed. So when you look at that off-campus housing webpage, a lot of the properties have a note about whether or not they have a shuttle or some other service to get you to campus, or if they're right on one of the campus transit lines. It's also worth noting that there's some different permits that you can get depending on how often you drive to campus, if you're going to be driving to and from campus, as well as there's options to get a student discount on either on a MARTA pass if you wanted to use public transit to get to and from campus. As far as timeline for looking for off-campus housing, we know for y'all coming in the spring, things probably feel a little bit different, but it is really not too late for y'all to find housing off-campus for the spring if you'd like, and certainly not too late to find off-campus housing for the next academic year. So generally speaking, now is about when most of our students will start to look for off-campus housing because the properties give you really great deals if you pre-lease in the fall. Those incentives get less and less as they get into the spring. The 1-bedrooms, there's fewer and fewer of those around campus, and those go the quickest, we find, for students. But generally speaking, we're pretty lucky here that there's enough saturation of housing nearby that prices aren't too outrageous and that you should still be able to find something into the summer if you wait. We just recommend you sign sooner rather than later for the kind of promotional savings that you can potentially get. And we do recommend you not wait past July. At that point is when you might actually have trouble securing a place. A couple of the things we want to mention just in terms of real estate scams, and I know for a lot of folks, especially if you are coming to the city for the first time, this might be a concern for you. Generally speaking, our advice is that if you see an advertisement for something that sounds too good to be true, it typically is. I would also say that we don't see that happen on that webpage that we listed, offcampus.housing.gottech.edu, because it has that connection to us and there's a certain amount of accountability that is extended to the properties through that website's existence. It means that we really don't get scams because they get caught before they would get listed. So we do say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, but generally speaking, if you're working through the off-campus housing webpage, you're going to be in a good spot. So once you have found a place that you like, just a few things to note that we want to make sure our students are mindful of. The first and most important is to read your lease carefully. And here we've got a list of a handful of things that we want to make sure students pay attention to, that we find historically students get surprised by or caught out by. So make sure you are looking at lease dates, especially if you sign an academic year lease, making sure that if the academic year lease ends on July 31st, instead of the couple of days into August that our summer semester ends, that's something to be mindful of. Knowing about late fees, like I mentioned, some properties might waive them early in the year, but maybe not later in the year. Understanding some of the community rules, the different costs and fees that you could incur. All that's really important to look through your lease before you sign it and understand those things to make you a better tenant. Generally speaking, you'll need a co-signer, which is typically a parent or a guarantor. It's really common for student housing that y'all don't have the money to put up, and so you would have a co-signer. Just kind of being that fiduciary responsible adult. Again, it's really common in student housing, so most of these properties will be well practiced at it. Just a warning to y'all that you'll probably need to identify that person. Before moving in, again, depending on what kind of housing you move into, you'll need to set up utilities, depending on what's actually offered. Typically, we find students need to set up Wi-Fi and electric. Sometimes gas. Fewer and fewer places off campus that have been built in the last decade, very few of them have gas appliances. A lot of them do have garbage included, but if that needs to be set up, that can be done through the city. And similarly, water is typically included, but if not, it's set up through the city. We cannot overstate how important it is that you get renter's insurance. Whether or not you live on campus or off campus, please get renter's insurance. It is relatively affordable and is absolutely worth it 100,000,000%. There's a lot of great companies that provide renter's insurance for students, and actually on our housing website, one of our many knowledge articles that we have is about renter's insurance and some of the things that we want to make sure you're aware of for that. So please, please, please pursue renter's insurance. Make sure you know what the move-in date and process is for the building. It is different for some of the buildings around us, and some of them have some pretty strict protocols for move-in. And again, we can't recommend a roommate agreement enough. I know I mentioned that you can sublease through the website in a way that is behind the single sign-on, so that you know that you're only working with Georgia Tech folks. If you are somebody who ends up subleasing, make sure that you amend any existing agreements that the roommates had before you moved in. Again, I don't think we have a ton of questions or issues with this come across our desk because we have the like being between students helps a lot. So I believe that brings us to the end of that. Yeah, and I see we already have some questions going. So we're going to work through each of these questions as we go, but we'll also try to take an opportunity to type in a response for these as necessary. So I see the first question is, after signing the contract, when will we know whether we will be getting on-campus housing for spring 25? I just need to know in case you don't live on campus.
So for spring 2025, like I mentioned, you will be applying for housing or you'll be applying for the wait list. It's very clear when you log into My Housing that if you are joining the wait list, you know that up front. So if you were to apply for housing today, we're not on a wait list currently, you would have housing for spring 2025. And then, as I mentioned, in December, that is when you will be able to self-assign into a room and make that room selection.
The next question we had is there a lease that we need to sign up for off-campus housing? Yes, there will definitely be a lease. Each property will have their own lease, and they are the ones who will give it to you and kind of facilitate that transaction. But yes, you will definitely have a lease. If you find yourself living somewhere and you haven't signed a lease, you in danger. So, yeah, you should definitely have a lease. Most of the leases for the properties nearby are pretty similar. For the most part, they use the standard Georgia renter's lease, but like I said, a lot of them have special stipulations that support students or kind of are to facilitate their student community, so. I have submitted the housing application for today for spring 25. How about fall 25? Do I need to submit that application again?
You will actually go back into My Housing and you will be able to select the academic year 25-26 housing application. So when you go in, you see the application at the top, you should be able to see a spring 2025 application, which you've already completed. And then below that should be the academic year 25-26 application. If you are not seeing that in your My Housing, please contact our help desk and we will try and troubleshoot to see why you are unable to see the academic year application.
All right, I'm dropping this response into the chat so that you'll have that in response to your questions here. Allison, will we be guaranteed the apartment style rooms such as North Ave or GLC instead of Harris? Like, how will we know which we're in line for?
We can never guarantee what space you're going to be able to assign into because it's all based on the availability of what we have. So we currently have students who have a full academic year contract who are canceling the spring portion of that contract because they're either studying abroad, they're graduating, they're going to do a co-op and internship. So we will have students moving out in December, and that will determine whether what spaces we have available in the apartments and in the suites. Typically, we have more apartments available than suites, but it really just depends on who is moving out at the end of fall 2024. And again, you'll be able to make those selections in December.
Allison, if I applied for the on-campus housing lottery and got in, will I be able to pick what hall I want to live in, or is it assigned?
If you apply for the lottery for academic year, you will still be able to select your room in early spring. So if you apply for spring housing, you will do that room selection in December. If you apply for academic year lottery and you do receive housing, you'll be able to make that room selection in early spring. And so those are kind of the two different timelines you're looking at from spring housing to your academic year housing.
I am putting a note in the typed response to this, just that because the room selection for academic year is based on your number of credit hours earned at Georgia Tech, you as a transfer student will be very low and one of the last to choose, but don't worry, you will have a room and that's what matters. So, all right, our next question, how do we get renters insurance for on-campus housing? Does Tech have a specific company that they work with or recommend? We do not, but we do have a list of companies that we know are great to work with. We don't have a recommendation that Georgia Tech has made, but I know, and actually, if you go through this whole housing process, when you select a room, we'll actually give you an opportunity to look at GradGuard and a few other companies. So there's a couple of different options, and actually, Allison, I wonder if we have the ability to drop the knowledge article into that response. One way or the other, we'll drop that knowledge article about renters insurance here in a second, and that will give you just some good options to work with. There's no one in particular that we recommend. There's no requirement, just heavy, heavy, heavy recommendation that you have it, period. All right. Our next question is, are student apartments willing to do spring leases for 6 months or 1 year, because most of them seem to only be doing fall leases? If you're looking at the website with all the off-campus housing, you can actually filter for 6-month leases and for spring only leases. I would say your other good bet though is to look at the sublease page, because a lot of students who just recently found out that they're going to co-op or study abroad are going to need someone else to take over their lease. So especially for someone coming in for spring only, that is a good option. There's a question about, is a lease available for 1 semester? Again, for off-campus housing, there's folks who will do a 6-month lease, a 12-month lease, or even shorter in some cases. For us, we have the application right now for spring only. We're also currently running the application for the full academic year of next year. My housing application was completed for spring, but it isn't showing up on my Tech application portal. What should I do?
It should show up in your My Housing. It is separate than your admission portal. I do know that we added in housing applications to your admission portal as a checklist item. And if it's not showing up there, it takes about 24 hours for the systems to talk to each other. So we get information from the admissions office about who has been accepted to Georgia Tech and who is deposited. And then StarRes, which is our housing system, also sends information to admissions to say their application has been complete. So if you're talking about your actual Georgia Tech admission portal, it may take up to 24 hours. If you're talking about your My Housing portal and you don't see it, please contact our help desk, and I will drop that information in the webinar chat as well, and they can help troubleshoot and look up your specific information.
The next question is there an additional cost for academic year on-campus housing? So there is a fee for housing. Off the top of my head right now, depending on which type of housing you're in, it's between $3,500 and $4,500 a semester. So again, for a full academic year, you would double that. So there is a cost, and that is something that will go directly to your tuition account, if you're living on campus.
And I will say our current rates for fall 24, spring 25 are currently listed on our site, and I'll drop that into the webinar chat as well. Please note that our rates are evaluated every year by the Board of Regents. We do not set our rates, that is set by the University System of Georgia. So we will update this website with our summer 2025 and the next academic year rates once they have been approved by the university system. So just take that into account. These rates may not be the exact same from spring 2025 through summer and then next academic year.
It looks like we had another similar question about not seeing it show up on your academic portal. So I would say if it's been a couple of days and you still have concerns about that, don't hesitate to call the housing help desk, because we can verify on our side that your, application went through. All right, the next question, if we sign up for on-campus housing, we can't sign up for off-campus, even if we change our mind or something like that? You absolutely can. You have, the deadline will change depending on whether you're talking about applying for just this spring or for next academic year, but you do have a certain amount of time that you can cancel your application for on-campus housing without paying a penalty. Typically, that runs up until like probably early December for spring only. So if you've applied for spring only housing, you also are interested in off-campus housing, we just want you to make that decision and cancel your contract with us before that penalty occurs, because then you will get charged. So that should all be on the contracts webpage.
And I will drop that in the chat. It also includes the cancellation policy for next academic year. So if you apply for the lottery and do receive housing this month and you decide you do want to live off campus, you'll be able to cancel your academic year 25-26 housing contract before July 1st with no penalty. And then we can give your spot to a student that's on the wait list. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you that if you are even considering living on campus for academic year 25-26, I would go ahead and apply now before that November 18th at 8 a.m. deadline to be considered for the lottery. Because if you don't apply by that deadline, you will be added again to the wait list at the order of your application after all of those other people who are on the wait list. So I highly, highly encourage you to go ahead and apply for academic year housing. And then if you change your mind, you can cancel penalty free before July 1st.
I'm so glad that you knew those dates off the top of your head better. This next question I want to make sure we touch on. In the application, we need to select a meal plan. Can this be changed later? So as an incoming transfer student, adding a meal plan should be voluntary. It should not be required. If it is requiring you to, give us a call, because that means we need to fix something on the back end with your application. It should not be required. That said, if you do want to sign up for a meal plan, we certainly recommend it. It's, makes life easier to not have to do your own shopping and such. And for the most part, you have an option to change that up until classes start. And even then, dining typically sends an email about 1 week into the semester asking if anybody wants to change their meal plan again. So you usually have up until the semester starts, and then you have kind of one more chance after the semester has started to change it if you decide to. Allison, is there any on-campus apartment option where one parent can stay with the child?
We do not. All of our undergraduate and grad population, we do not allow family members to stay with their student on campus. The only exception to that rule is our family housing. So if you are the student, your child can live with you in family housing, and that is a separate application process. But the parent would have to be the Georgia Tech student. A Georgia Tech student cannot live with their non-student parent.
I mean, there's been one case of it and it was a really weird special case and the student was like 10.
Yeah.
So it was a very special case and it had a lot of approvals, so. That said, please, as a parent who wants to stay connected with your child, please plan to come to family weekend. It's
Yes.
wonderful. How do we get transfer year experience for spring? And I honestly, Allison, I don't know that we even have space available for transfer year experience for spring.
As of right now, the transfer year experience is full. However, if you are interested in joining the transfer year experience, please contact the help desk because they can add a note to your account. We don't have the application open currently because there is no space, but what we can do is have that list of students interested in case a space does open up. As I mentioned, we're still getting cancellations throughout the rest of the semester. So we will try and keep a list of those spaces, but that application is not open currently because there is not space available. But please contact the help desk if you would like to learn more.
Next we have, if we're unsure whether we want to stay on campus or off for the academic year 25-26, should we go ahead and fill out an application? Or would we possibly get charged a cancellation fee if we decide later? So if you are not sure, we recommend that you apply for on-campus housing because that is what is harder to get. That said, we would only charge you a cancellation fee if you wait a really long time to tell us. So as long as you are mindful of that cancellation schedule so that you tell us before we would charge you a fee, you should be fine. And it is fairly reasonable in terms of giving you some time up until classes start, basically. So, but we do recommend you go ahead and apply for on-campus housing if you have any remote interest in it, because it will be too late after that. Can you pay for spring 25 housing on campus in January? Yeah, that'll hit your bursars account in January with all the other stuff. It's usually like a couple of days into classes when all that hits your account and when the bill is due. So it will get rolled into your spring fees and other things. If we sign the spring housing contract, then get a sublease and don't want to take the on-campus option, can we cancel? When is the deadline to do that? Oh, great. So we've answered this question, but I think we're gonna pull that link and make sure that the link with the cancellation schedule gets put there. Oh, she's on top of it. Way ahead of me here.
So for spring 2025, if you cancel on or before January 5th, it's a $500 penalty fee. And if you cancel on or after January 6th, you'll be charged the full spring rent.
Allison, if we still have we don't have that. The question about how we can choose roommates. So there's a couple ways you can do it, and you honestly don't have to. Many of our students will just select a room and go with whoever else is there, and because we are very good about doing roommate agreements, that's usually not a problem. That said, if you would like to choose a roommate, there's a couple of ways you can do it. If you know someone by name, you can type in their name and say, Allison and I want to be roommates, and Allison and I both agree to it, and that's that. You can also fill out a brief survey. It's a profile of like whether or not you're early riser or late night type, whether you're messy or tidy, those kind of questions. And you can use that to find other people who might be a good fit for you. And you have an opportunity to reach out to folks, sort of like internet dating, to see if that's a good match. So there's a couple of different ways you can, but again, a lot of folks just go with whoever else selected the same room.
And some people are very particular about what room they're looking for. If you're doing our Explore Our Housing options and you know that you want to live in a specific building, a lot of students will, again, choose based on where they would like to live. That's more important to them than who their roommate is.
Oh, I see someone responded, yes, it's requiring a meal plan. Please do reach out to us at the Housing Help Desk so we can figure out why you're showing up that way in our system, because we should be able to get that fixed. You know that too. If I defer spring 25 transfer to fall 25, since I may get a co-op opportunity, do I need to pay a penalty for housing? So if you decide to co-op and not live on campus, you just need to tell us before that cancellation penalty hits.
we have a form that you would fill out to remove yourself from housing without a penalty.
If we have a specific roommate in mind that we found outside of the roommate selection program, how do I put that in the system? When you go into My Housing, and this is, once you have the application, you have a spot and all that. Once we open the ability to find roommates, you basically go in and you can just type in their name and they just pop right up. And then what you say is like, I want to be roommates. They also have to click accept that they are also agreeing that they want to be roommates. We like to make sure both people agree. So make sure that you both go in and accept that person, but it's really pretty straightforward in the roommates portion of My Housing. You just type in their name. If in the application we chose not to sign up for a meal plan, can we sign up for one later? Absolutely. Georgia Tech Dining has a great voluntary meal plan webpage that is running 365 days a year, and they are happy for you to sign up for a voluntary meal plan at any time of year. And the great thing about voluntary meal plans is you have a lot more options than a first year meal plan. You can get anything from like $50 of flex dollars and 10 swipes, all the way up to like 1,000 swipes and no flex dollars. Like you really can dial it in based on what you think you need. So voluntary meal plans give you a lot more flexibility and options. How do payments work for on-campus housing? Is it one time or monthly? Or are there separate fees for utilities, etc.? Housing is a one-time per semester fee that will go to your, like I said, it'll go to your bursar account, and it hits as one solid fee. Utilities and everything is included. All the programs and things that your RAs put on, all of that is covered. And it's because it's the same as your bursar's account. It's even like it's 1 month fee to the Georgia Tech everything. So that is the one nice thing. And again, when you start to move off campus, that's one of the curves to learn through is paying for your housing on a monthly basis. All right, our next question we have come in. I have submitted the spring 25 application. Now, if I submit the 25-26 application, do I need to pay anything extra? No, there's no additional application fee or anything like that. Once you've paid that application fee that first time, you're good to go. Now, you will, of course, need to pay for the housing for next year if you get housing for next year, but there's no additional fee for the application. Does signing the contract come before choosing housing? Yep. So signing a contract with us just means I want a space. You don't yet decide which space. So signing the contract is just to secure a bed space, period. And then later either in the spring or the summer, depending on what we're doing, that's when you'll choose which room. So signing the contract is just to secure a room.
And also to clarify that you will sign a housing contract whether you are applying for that space or you are applying to put yourself on the wait list. So you are signing a contract through the housing application process, whether we're on a wait list or not. So that way, if you do come off the wait list, you've already signed that contract. You don't have to go back in and do it again, and you'll be able to continue with the rest of the housing process. We are going to continue to post the exact answers that we've said live in the chat just so that you have them. One more question. Are there mixed gendered on-campus housing options?
We can talk about that.
We do have gender inclusive housing on campus. Once you've applied for housing through your resources at My Housing, you can apply for gender inclusive housing. That is an opportunity for you to live with a member of the opposite sex in specific spaces. And those rooms are profiled for that purpose so that you are also living with other students who have opted into gender inclusive housing.
And I will drop the article about that. All right. If I signed a contract for a 25-26, does that mean I will get on-campus housing for fall and spring guaranteed? So you have not likely signed a contract. If you've applied for 25-26, that's great. You won't find out if you have a guaranteed spot and a contract Oh, do they sign it as part
You
of it?
sign your contract as part of this application that you just did, but you're applying for the housing lottery. So you currently do not have a space on campus. You are being put into the pool of all of our other returning students who are applying for the lottery, and you will know on November 22nd whether you have housing for fall 25, spring 2026, or if you're on the wait list. So right now, and just to give some additional context, the housing lottery application opened in late September for all of our current residents and returning students. And then again, you as new spring 2025 transfers are considered returning residents for the academic year, which is why we wanted to have this additional session so that y'all understood the timeline, because it is very different than anything we've done in the past. If you have additional questions or you need some additional clarification, please contact the help desk. We're more than happy to talk through how it looks on your end as far as the application goes. We have some wonderful knowledge articles that you can find at our contact us page from the website that gives you a little bit more information on why we are doing a lottery process, our priority allocation strategies moving forward. So I will also drop that knowledge article repertoire of information in the webinar chat.
Allison, we've had another question about roommate selection process, and you probably just know the dates, for the upcoming terms a little bit better than me, or at least the timeline in general.
We have not set the exact date of when that roommate selection will open, but it will be in very early December or even maybe late November. Once the roommate selection process is open, we will send out an email to all of our students who have already applied for spring 2025 housing. So you'll be notified once that process has begun. So just please be on the lookout for that email.
At this moment, it looks like the remaining questions that we have coming in are sort of, specific to, we've had more come in, all right. For gender inclusive housing, is it that roommates can be different genders or a whole room?
It depends on where you are living. So if you're in an apartment, for example, each apartment space is their own separate bedroom. If you're a part of gender inclusive housing, all 4 of those bed spaces could be a different gender. And then for our suites, similarly, you'll have 2 residents on one side of the suite, 2 on the other. All 4 of those roommates, could have different gender identities. So yes, your roommates could be different genders, but the whole room overall is profiled as a gender inclusive space. I hope that answers your question.
Honestly, I generally think of gender inclusive housing as a roommate matching thing
Mhm.
more than anything. There's not, for us, it basically just determines who you see as a roommate option, and it's only other people who have said, I'm not particular about the gender of my roommate. So because you've been marked that way, it's like everybody who lives within behind that locked door is also someone who said, I'm not particular about the gender of my roommate. It looks like that brings us to the end of our questions. We're gonna give folks another minute or two, in case any more have come through, or if there's any that we missed and didn't get to. I know we have been dropping several links to the Housing Help Desk in our base of knowledge articles. We really recommend y'all spend a lot of time there if you need it. For the gender inclusive housing, for the bathroom that goes with it, it depends on whether you're in traditional or suite style or apartment style. If you're in suite style or apartment style, the bathroom is inherently gender inclusive because it's behind that door. If you're in gender inclusive housing in the traditional halls, the community bathroom that is like related or associated with your room is a gender inclusive bathroom. So that will extend into those spaces. But depending on what your setup is, it kind of means something a little bit different in terms of how close it is.
Again, we'll give just another minute or two We thank you for joining us and your wonderful questions that we've had tonight. This recording, again, will be posted on the website on our incoming student page. In the next few days, I would probably give us till Monday in case you need to reference anything. But if you have additional questions, our housing help desk is always open, whether that's chat, a ticket, which is like an email, or you can give them a call. They are a wonderful resource, whether you are living on or still making the decision about your campus housing options.
I think we are gonna, as we close out, we'll make sure that we get answers to the last few questions that have come in, or, you know, like lingering, one-on-one questions. But we do really appreciate all y'all being here today, and look forward to connecting with y'all again when you join us in the spring. All right.